And on to Guildford, the eighth round of the championship and the midway point of the season. Many teams were starting to find their place in the season and understand whether to keep pressing on with their current cars or start getting their cars ready for getting their new cars ready for next season. Driver moves were also afoot, although nothing had been fully confirmed as of yet. Going into qualifying though, it was a wet and dry affair though, as many teams were caught out by the very inconsistent weather of wet, dry, intermediates, and everything in between. Even a monsoon at one point with lightning and everything. But in Q3, however, something interesting happened at the end of the session. Schmidt, Surkov, Lipinen, and Pole is going to go to, I think, Sharp. No, Wexler gets it. Oh, it's a tie! It was a tie! Sharp and Wexler tied for Pole, but Wexler gets it. Chapman and Sainz 6 and 7.
Gustavo Costa's engine blows up.
So, pole position was a bit of a surprise with a tie for pole, but Dieter Wexler getting it on countback, with Nina Holtz alongside. Very annoyed to be starting second, but still happy to be on the front row. Sharp, a credible third, with Vasquez fourth. Wolfgang Schmidt fifth, despite being the first one to start his final run, with Chapman a disappointing sixth at his home race. Sorry to Naki on the next row, with Iker Vidal sneaking into Q3 alongside Surkov, who spun on his lap. Rick DeGraff was outside of Q3 for a change in 11th. Cameron 13th alongside teammate Cassidy.
What sucks though is that I wish that they, I almost got pulled by dint of the inters, just barely
Kobe
working.
Coro, another British contingent, was 19th, with Jeremy Woodford behind at 20th. Jenny North, a disappointing 22nd, with an all-Brazilian back row of Ribeiro and Anna Livier, both struggling and getting caught out in the wet conditions. With more rain expected throughout the race as well, it'll be interesting to see how everything played out going into the race. And into the race they went, with everybody starting on dry tires, as the rain could be spotted a few miles out, as several drivers had poor or jumped the start going into turn one. So he sharp spun off the road in turn one, having caught out by the green track conditions. Surkov clearly jumped the start, along with a few other drivers who had issues or poor starts. Although up at the front, it was Wexler pulling away from Nina Holtz at the start, with everybody else falling in line. Although Chapman had gotten a flying start and was up to fourth already, with Vasquez making a flyer as well up into third. Prachapatia also got a flyer, moving up to 11th, although that was due to a jump start penalty. Vic Castley, however, at the back was the only major victim aside from Surkov, who crashed out again, being caught out by the green track conditions in the middle sector. And that would be the first car out of the race. Surkov, however, would also effectively be knocked out of competition for the time being, with a drive-through penalty for his jump start shenanigans, promoting Samuel Blanc up into the points in 9th, and Rick DeGraff up into 10th, having disposed of Prachapatia. A couple laps later, on lap 5, having disposed of Vasquez's inferior Catano-engined car in the Catano, the Steinman team have made the swap, and Chapman neatly overtook Holtz to take second. But only 2 laps later, everybody was starting to pit for intermediate tires. The rain on its way much earlier than expected, as many people in the field pitted immediately at the end of lap 7, although most of the field stayed out an extra lap, which turned out to be quite the inspired decision, as Anna Oliveira's car gave up the ghost with a rear wing failure, knocking her miserable weekend to a close. Chapman came in at the end of lap 8 for intermediate tires as well, along with most of the rest of the field. along with most of the rest of the field as well. It'll be interesting to see who got the blend at the end of the pit lane, as they were almost 3 wide coming into the pit lane at one point, as several people were coming in as others were leaving their pit stop. Although Chapman came out with the lead, the extra lap on the dry tires, paying dividends, promoting him to first, Lippin in the second, Sorry in the third, Samuel Blanc to an eye-watering fourth for the Thornton team, and also promoting Kofi Koro up into the points, with Wexler down in 10th, the previous race leader. Holtz was down in 17th, having stopped at the end of lap 7, which also didn't help her, as she picked up Pratchett Batia for a lowly 17th place. Meanwhile, teammate Koro was up into 10th, and in the points for a change, staring at the back, unbelievably, of Dieter Wexler. And then the mistakes started happening as the rain intensified and the track began to flood in some places, Jeremy Woodford being the first victim of it. Along with Esteban Ribeiro's electronics on lap 12, the electronics giving up, and he was out, as the field all began diving in on the same lap for wet tires. Off camera, Nina Holtz off camera, some of the other drivers near the back had also spun, including Moreno twice, Woodford again, Vidal almost going off the road once, and Hamron spinning as well. And then Kofi Koro spun out of 10th place, a disappointment for him, but with the race still very wet, it was a long way to go, as Cyril Lundqvist also locked up in the very slippery conditions. And it was appearing to get even worse, as Hamron spun as well, and the rain began to intensify even harder. Jeremy Woodford was having a home race to forget, as he went off the road again. The flying Richter Graf became the cruising Richter Graf as he spun as well, and then Lucia Flores' gearbox gave up the ghost, and she was out in the sister Rosardo Corsa. So scratch one more driver from the race. Surkov also spun in the middle of that off screen, and he dropped back to 10th. Then Javier Vasquez crashed out on lap 16. Another driver who with a lot of experience crashing out and not being able to handle the tricky conditions, which unseen by everybody, promoted Maria Gonzalez up into 3rd place, with Nilo Sarian right behind in 4th, Samuel Blanc still running a very credible 5th, and Wexler finally back up into 6th place in a more reasonable position in the race. But it was still going to be a long way to go, and there were even darker clouds on the horizon with thunder and lightning expected. It was about to get really wet, really fast, and really treacherous for all the drivers. Could they hang on in the tricky wet conditions, or would the unprecedented step be taken to throw the red flag, as Cyril Lundqvist spun off screen in turn 1 yet again. Turn 1 turning into a bit of a swimming pool and a bit of a treacherous one if anybody went offline. And then Maria Gonzalez spun as well in the middle sector, proving the point and spinning out of a podium position, promoting Wexler up into 3rd. Then she spun again in turn 1, the same corner that caught out Cyril Lundqvist, along with Moreno, who spun off in sympathy as well. It was turning into a slip and slide of a race, as off screen as while everybody was spinning or making mistakes. Nina Holton finally made her way back into the points in 7th, passing Surkov as well, who ran wide, and then she immediately lost it again, proceeding to spin a few seconds later, losing all that ground yet again. Oh, Chapman! Chapman's crashed! Chapman for the lead! Chapman has crashed! Safety car deployed! Chapman has crashed from the race lead! Unbelievable! Harry Chapman was out. The championship hopeful out of the race, and possibly throwing his championship away with that crash from the lead. At the same time, Iker Vidal's Cosworth engine gave up the ghost, having sounding iffy all race due to a misfire. As it turned out later, the side pods had ingested so much water that it managed to get into the engine and destroyed it. But In the chaos of Chapman crashing out of the lead, Aki Lipinen was the leader on the restart, with everybody having put on fresh wets, which were now stone cold due to the safety car, and as everybody finally got back underway in still treacherous conditions, the spray being particularly bad. And it was proven to be right immediately as Aki Lipinen spun out of the lead in turn 2 on the restart, dropping all the way back down to 17th, promoting Wexler up into the lead again, and Samuel Blanc up into a surprising second place for a couple seconds at least, as Neil Sarn was right on him and trying to get past the Thornton Lamborghini car. Although Blanc wouldn't care. Even if he let Sarn through, he was still in a very good position, although he had a very angry field of very feisty drivers and very slippery conditions all behind him. It would be treacherous for anybody to try and stay on the road at this point, as the DNS were also piling up as well, due to either water-induced electronic issues, the usual mechanical failures, and spins and crashes. As Sarian finally on the main straight managed to get by the Thornton and move himself up into second, making it a Rossini 1-2 with Blanc down to third. But with over 20 laps to go, it would be a test to see if anybody can hang on. Something that wasn't hanging on was Zoe Sharp's right rear suspension. The suspension giving way and knocking her out of the race. Scratch another car from the race. Sharp would not be happy with this one indeed, and Jeremy Woodford was also not having a happy day as he spun for the 5th time in the race, making things even more annoying for his team as a whole and his potential employment going forward. Maureen Gonzalez in the meantime had moved up into 3rd past Blanc, and then Jeremy Woodford crashed, putting an end to his miserable weekend and the Lucky Strike team's race as well. At the same time as that happened, Wolfgang Schmidt spun, and Surkov also spun off in sympathy as well in the same corner that took out Chapman 10 laps earlier. This promoted Prachapatia up into the points to the surprise of everybody. However, he still had a 20-second time penalty for jumping to start at the beginning. Sari Lumford spun for the 3rd time in turn 1, all 3 of her spins coming in the same corner. Then Samuel Blanc a lap later did the same thing, spinning out of 5th place, promoting Holtz back up into 4th, and both Catorces into the points for the time being. It was proving to be a race of just trying to keep the car on the island for everybody as everybody kept trudging on through the rain. Then Prachapatia spun at the end of lap 35. In the final few corners, dropping him out of the points. Although with his penalty, he was still out of the points regardless, and promoting Coro into the points, and then Hamron into the points until Hamron spun in turn 1, promoting Moreno up into the points. To top it all that, Surkov was still out of the points. Coro proceeded to lock up, which wrecked his tires a little bit in the process. And then he spun, dropping him down to 14th at the end of lap 38, promoting Moreno back into the points. It was a topsy-turvy race of just trying to see who was going to finish where, given all the mistakes and mishaps. Gonzalez was up into the podium again until she wasn't, with Schmidt getting an amazing run to pass her and Holtz, promoting Schmidt into the podium. Then Prachapatia's car gave up the ghost with another right rear suspension failure. So Attia was out, and Catorce's hopes would have to rely on Coro. Unfortunately, the rain didn't play into the favor of the Catorce team or several others, who had to make an extra stop for wets due to wrecking their previous tires due to spins, lockups, and other shenanigans. Which then, on the switch to intermediates, left them well behind everybody else. On the bright side, though, Singer Jono Hamron was up into the points in 10th in the Asia Road Racing car. He was up into the points. Sarian had taken the lead due to keeping his tires alive for a lap longer than Wexler to give him a massive lead in the race of 5 seconds. Wexler charged as hard as he could to try and catch up, but it wasn't to be. The last few laps of the race clocked away in intermediate conditions, with Nilo Sarian picking up the win in the Guildford Grand Prix. Wexler came home second to make it a Rossini 1-2, a good thing for the constructors. Holtz came home third, denying Lippinen the podium. Gonzalez came home a credible fifth, despite everything she went through. Rick DeGraaf quietly snuck his way back up into sixth. North from near the back of the grid up into seventh. Surkov eighth, despite his drive-through at the start. Schmidt a frustrating ninth. Sinead O'Hammond getting points in the Asia Road Racing in 10th. Blanc a disappointing 11th. Siri Lundqvist an angry 12th, despite given all her mistakes she made in that race, claiming I could have been 6th. Why did I make all those mistakes? But the season was now at the halfway point, and that report will be next.